A Jewish cemetery in South Jersey. Janka Festinger Speace is buried here. While this is Janka's last resting place, her story doesn't end here. This is where her story begins. A story that she will tell in her own words from beyond the grave. It was in 1945 that Janka wrote a 60-page letter about her experiences in the Holocaust. This letter had been hidden for more than 50 years. This documentary is the story of that letter. While the subject of Holocaust survivors is not new to the documentary film, each new approach to the telling of these horrifying and sometimes victorious stories may somehow validate the lives of those who were lost and those forever changed, giving them a place in history. While Hitler tried to eradicate the Jewish people completely as individuals and as a culture, these films act on behalf of those who could not tell their stories. For her sons, Janka is a journey of discovery. Their mother's life in Romania, Poland, and Germany, her Jewish faith, and the emotional existence of a woman who lived through the horrors of the Nazi reign to eventually raise a happy family in America. After the liberation, families like the Festingers were forced to pick up the pieces of their nearly ruined lives. Janka and her remaining family, her sister Betty and brother Sandy, worked for the American Red Cross in Rosenheim, Germany. Late in 1945, Janka met Robert Speace, an American GI with the 39th Army stationed in Germany. They were married on March 3, 1946, in a marriage that was the first to be recognized by the U.S. Army in Germany. The Army even hosted the ceremony. Robert was shipped home later that year, and Janka soon followed. Twin sons, Oscar and David, were born 2 years later. Janka was a homemaker and seamstress and was in high demand because she was European trained. In 1961, the family moved to Moorestown, New Jersey, and she worked for Bamberger's department store until her retirement in 1982. Robert died the following year, and Janka stayed in the family home until the last year of her life. She died in 1994, a victim of Parkinson's. After Janka's death, Oscar decided to write a play about what he knew of his mother's life as a Jewish immigrant to America. He called upon relatives to share memories about Janka. It was her sister, Betty, who gave Oscar the information that would forever change his life and his brother's. She would send him a 60-page letter that Janka had written in 1945. They learned that Janka had written it for Uncle Morris Festinger, who lived in Cleveland. After not receiving word for years because of the war, Morris wanted to know what had happened to the family he had left behind in Sighet, Romania, when he emigrated to America 30 years earlier. He was finally able to contact Janka. Now Oscar and David will tell their mother's story. Janka begins in an apartment building in Rosenheim, Germany. A solitary figure of a woman is standing at a window.
Dear Uncle Morris, our happiness was boundless as amid joyful tears we read dear Uncle's letter. Since our liberation, this is our first happy moment. After all, we are not so orphaned in this world. We also have somebody to whom we belong.
This is the beginning to Janka's letter, a letter which unfolds throughout the film, tracing her family, the Festingers, as they are taken from their home in Romania to the death camps of the Nazi regime. Simple reenactments, a shadow on the wall, the glistening of a cobblestone street, The harsh edge of barbed wire, the rumbling of a train, illustrate the tensions as the Nazis occupy the city, as Jews are rounded up and forced onto trains, and as Janka, a young woman of 28, arrives in Auschwitz. Very personal words to her uncle as she describes her forced journey from home to Auschwitz, Birkenau, Geislingen, to Dachau, and finally to liberation.
Within seconds, they opened all the doors of the wagons and ordered everyone out. We had to leave all our packages and get out empty-handed. It was totally, or very, very dark. We were stunned to be there. The only thing that eased our misery is that we were finally out in the fresh air again. It is hard for me to write these words. How in minutes they separated the men from the women, the boys from their fathers, the girls from their mothers, young people from old people. And sadly, those mothers who did not give up their children from their arms were taken with their children to the far side, which there is no returning. Can I say that this was the worst, the very worst night of my life? It was like a bad dream. How is it possible that there can be such cruelty, such sadism on this earth? Did all this really happen? And what else was I and thousands of other Jews going to endure? I've become so distraught as I write these words to Uncle that it is hard for me to continue. But since you asked me to write down everything, it doesn't matter even if it takes me a week to do it. I will continue. It was difficult for me to enjoy freedom. Is it possible that for us there is some joy left in this world? Liberation did come, but unfortunately, not for Gizzy. She died on the 31st of March, a Saturday evening at 6 o'clock. We were liberated on the 1st of May. 2 days before her death, I begged for a little bit of milk from all the SS women in the camp. Unfortunately, without success. Even though this was her last wish, I couldn't grant it to her. I can't imagine a worse and more bestial nation of people than the Germans. All her suffering was not enough. They kept her body in the bathroom for 7 days before it was buried. I had to see her every time we went to the bathroom. To see her dead like that. The person who was like a mother and sister to me. The person who, when alive, was always smiling and laughing. May 1st, in the afternoon, the American tanks arrived. It was a wonderful sight. The SS gave themselves up without a single shot. Just 5 days before, I told my sister Betty that I would only believe that I've been liberated when I have a whole loaf of bread of my own. Dear Uncle, as I was getting off the cattle wagon, an American soldier took a knapsack from an SS soldier, and by sheer chance, he threw it toward me. And what do you think? There was a whole loaf of bread in it, and many other things. In the midst of happy tears on all sides, the tanks kept coming. Everybody smiling and crying. The American soldiers from the tanks were throwing candy and cigarettes to everybody.
Interspersed between these glimpses of the past, the viewer is introduced to the survivors and the children of those who suffered. The filmmakers, Janka's sons Oscar and David, interview family members, Janka's sister, brother, and cousins who are still alive and who endured the Holocaust.
And what it was is, it was like a college blue book, but it's not blue. It's like an orange color, faded a little bit. And it's written in pencil. It's 60 pages long. And it's written neatly in hand from the front cover all the way to the back cover. Turned the book around and wrote to the front. 60 pages, and it ends with a poem. Is there maybe hope for the future?
We didn't know what's going to happen. We didn't know anything. We all gathered around Father, and we were trying to see if he knows everything. Nobody knew anything. They lined us up separately, the young children, with the mother. Then they went straight to the crematorium, the children and the mother.
This questioning continues as David and Oscar begin their own trek through Eastern Europe as they follow in their mother's footsteps in a symbolic recreation of the emotional content of the letter. They visit places of great terror as well as the good places in Sighet. Family photographs and home movies remind us of the personal toll taken. The story ends here at Janka's grave, here where the story began.